Morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending where in the world you are. My name is Alex Vines. I'm the director of the Africa programme at Chatham House, the Royal Institute of International Affairs here in London. And I'm delighted today to be your host of an hour conversation on South Africa's foreign policy, reflections on the United Nations Security Council and the African Union. As you know, in 2019-2020, South Africa served its third term as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, seeking to strengthen its role as a bridge builder and further justify a more permanent role for the country and the continent on that body. In February 2021, South Africa will also conclude its time as chair of the African Union, which, having used its tenure to promote peace and security issues, including closer cooperation with the UN Security Council, and also to advance regional economic integration. Indeed, this month, the African Free Continental Trade Area became operational. Obviously, things like COVID-19 have displaced some of the South African foreign policy priorities that were originally framed a couple of years ago when South Africa became a non-permanent member again of the UN Security Council, but some of them have been achieved. And so today we have Her Excellency Dr. Naledi Pandor, the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of South Africa, to reflect on the country's 2 years on the UN Security Council and 1 year of chairing the African Union, and to discuss South Africa's role in pursuing regional and global goals. As you will know, Dr. Pandor was formerly the Minister of Higher Education and Training from 2018 to 19 in South Africa, and prior to that also as Minister of Science and Technology. She has been a Member of Parliament since 1994, during which time she also served as ANC caucus whip and chairperson of the national provinces. So a couple of other points, just that this meeting is fully on the record. And when we get to the question and answer session, please either put your questions into the Q&A box, and my colleagues will then decide on whether we invite you to ask your question directly, or I'll read out the particular question. I also want to just draw my thanks to the South African High Commission here in London, and particularly Her Excellency High Commissioner Thembi Tambo. The High Commission has been tremendously helpful in partnering with Chatham House, including for facilitating the meeting today. And I myself, over the last few years, when South Africa was a member of a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, I bumped into the High Commissioner on a number of occasions as she was busy pursuing Security Council business on the behalf of South Africa. So I'm very grateful for her assistance in facilitating that the Foreign Minister of South Africa is able to speak today. Well, with no more ado, I want to hand over to Her Excellency Dr. Naledi Pandor to talk about South Africa's 2 years on the UN Security Council, its presidency of the AU, and indeed its vision for foreign policy moving forward. Minister, thank you very much in your busy schedule to find time to speak at Chatham House today, and I look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Vine. These are lessons we've had to learn in the past few months. Allow me to greet Her Excellency, our High Commissioner Tambo, as well as all excellencies and distinguished guests who join us this afternoon. You've outlined the theme that I was requested to reflect on. Let me thank Chatham House for this opportunity to speak to you today. I just wish to make two points that I hope will, to some degree, stimulate some debate as we get to the discussion point of this meeting. Firstly, South Africa's foreign policy has to a great degree been shaped by the history of particularly the governing party in the struggle against apartheid. That history relates to the African National Congress having adopted at a very early stage through one of our great leaders, Oliver Tambo, the pursuit of an international collaboration against apartheid, so an international dimension to the struggle for freedom. This partnership globally against apartheid developed a particular attitude on international matters within the African National Congress and has to a great degree shaped our foreign policy. So firstly, the notion that all of us in the world believe in freedom, that we are against racism, that we will join in solidarity with those who struggle and yearn for freedom and for political, civil, and socioeconomic rights. These ideals have, I think, shaped the manner in which we try to pursue our foreign policy. And the real politic of foreign policy practice has, I think, sometimes caused us to be rather surprised, because what we had assumed from the experience of our struggle for freedom, that all of us believe in these rights I've referred to, has proven not to be the case when others are free. So the people of Palestine are forgotten. The civilians who are killed in the wars we see daily are forgotten. So these ideals and belief in multilateralism, in seeking the good of all, which we uphold quite firmly, are often not realized in the practice or the relationships that we experience. Having said that, let me come back to my formal comments. So I will today reflect on the two major themes. Firstly, the 2-year non-permanent seat of the United Nations Security Council. And I refer to non-permanent quite firmly, given that we do believe the United Nations is in need of significant reform in order to ensure inclusion in the Security Council on a more permanent basis of regions that are currently excluded from the important role that it plays, and regions that only occupy non-permanent status from time to time. I also will reflect on the chairship of the African Union. And I repeat again that our foreign policy is derived both from our experience of struggle, but also incorporated in the process of negotiating a new constitution in our constitutional values, which articulate the promotion of equality, justice, non-racism, non-sexism, and the pursuit of a better world, and thus international cooperation. South Africa dedicated its term on the Security Council to the theme of the legacy of President Nelson Mandela, whose values and commitment to peace we commemorated very actively in the year 2018, the centenary of his birth. We felt we should use our place as a non-permanent member of the UNSC to advance the principles and ideals that President Mandela had lived his life committed to. Our country believes that peace is critical to development and progress on our continent of Africa. We're in fact very concerned about the ongoing conflicts we see on the continent, as we believe they're a significant barrier to the development that we have to pursue as Africa. We had hoped that in our election to the non-permanent seat, we would work hard at supporting Africa's objective of silencing the guns in Africa. Our election to the UNSC was the third term as a non-permanent member, and many observers and member states have described our role within it as partly successful and somewhat challenging. We believe that our non-permanent membership provided us with the opportunity to do what we had set out, which was to link our work to that goal of Africa, of silencing the guns. We also used that theme for our chairship from last year of the African Union. We use the term in the Security Council to promote the peaceful settlement of conflicts through the promotion of preventative diplomacy, inclusive dialogue, and post-conflict reconstruction and development. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic, which hit our country and many countries on the continent from around March 2020, compounded our challenges and caused us to refocus the agenda to a great degree and focus on a collective response to combating the pandemic and ensuring that we would have the ability to rebuild a safer world and a safer Africa when we had finalized the work in combating this health crisis. In our work in the Security Council, we advocated for strengthened partnership and closer cooperation between the UN Security Council and our AU's Peace and Security Council. We've always held the view that in order for the United Nations to successfully exert influence through its decisions, it's very important that it works closely with continental and regional bodies. And so in our work in the Security Council, we advocated and worked hard at building this close relationship. President Ramaphosa has led the way in encouraging UN and regional and sub-regional collaboration. He called an African and UNSC debate during our presidency of the Council in order to intensify South Africa's committed effort toward ending conflicts on the African continent and to further strengthening this partnership we believe is necessary between the AU and the United Nations. I must say we are very pleased that UN Secretary General Guterres is firmly committed to this relationship with the African Union and to it taking a key role within the continent in helping to address difficult conflicts and contentious matters. One of the key areas that African members of the Council addressed was that of pursuing this partnership with the UN and ensuring that dedicated attention was given to preventing conflict and assisting countries on the continent to arrive at negotiated settlement of disputes. This was in response to our practical implementation of Chapter 8 of the UN Charter, which stresses the importance of regional arrangements in contributing to international peace and security. However, as we sought to pursue this goal, we came against the challenge of the financing of particularly the AU peacekeeping missions that have been authorized by the Security Council. Often we are unable to properly fund these missions and thus to keep to the duty of maintaining peace and protecting civilians. It is vital that we, as the African Union, working with the United Nations, identify reliable and sustainable funding for the UN peace mission, the AU peace missions. This has been an ongoing challenge since the establishment of the African Union, and we have to resolve it given emerging conflicts on the continent. We were very pleased that through our work as a non-permanent member of the Security Council, we were able to draw the non-permanent African members together to form an alliance that would address issues on a common policy basis. The African members of the Council worked hard to secure commitments for that sustainable financing of AU peacekeeping missions. We ensured that we articulated the view that UN-assessed contributions would be the most reliable avenue of support for UN-mandated AU peace operations. We are continuing to argue for this even as we exit the Security Council as South Africa and the other non-permanent African members. We underline the need within the UN for the organization, along with the AU, to expedite consideration of this sustainability of funding issue to ensure that peace support operations are properly supported and can do their work effectively. We also agreed that the UN should allow us, through cooperation, to address the root causes and drivers of conflict in Africa, including focusing on the challenges of development and good governance. Because the absence of good governance, the weakness of democratic institutions, is often an underlying reason for the conflicts that emerge in many of our countries. And so rather than focus on addressing conflict when it is at the armed level, we believe it is important, even in situations of peace, to address a number of the underlying issues that give rise to the fights that we see. We have stressed these matters of addressing development, good governance, and democracy, particularly in the debate we presided over on Security Council peace building and sustaining of peace, what we call the Security Sector Governance and Reform Initiative. We were very pleased that the Security Council unanimously adopted our proposed resolution on security sector reform. The resolution builds on the solid policy framework, which is laid out by Resolution 2151, which was the first thematic Security Council resolution on security sector reform. That one had been piloted by the Republic of Nigeria, again indicating Africa's long-standing concern with conflict on the continent. Our new resolution tabled to the Security Council and adopted, Resolution 2553, and its focus on security sector reform was a recognition by the Council that greater emphasis has to be placed on conflict prevention, peace building, and sustaining peace by averting relapse into armed conflict. We agreed that in order to achieve this, states emerging from conflict have to develop and be supported to develop their own inclusive, context-specific security sector reform and governance approaches, which address the needs of the entire population with the active involvement of women and youth, as well as civil society actors. We also agreed that regional and international partners should partner with states to provide support which is aligned to domestic national security sector reform goals. As South Africa in the Security Council, we again continued to consistently express our solidarity with the peoples of Palestine and Western Sahara in their quest to achieve self-determination, fundamental freedom, equality, justice, and dignity. We were rather surprised to find sometimes that we were a lone voice in seeking solidarity for these peoples. We also advanced the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, as well as peace and security for youth in all areas where there's conflict. We intend to continue our commitment to multilateralism and to these objectives I've referred to, and to work in other multilateral fora including the UN Peacebuilding Commission, to pursue these objectives. We are committed to pursuing a rules-based order characterized by inclusion and equity, and we believe the UN is the primary vehicle for achieving these goals. Of course, all of us know that a lot of ground was lost in multilateralism in the past 4 years, and I don't need to say more, and we need to rebuild multilateral and international trust and cooperation. Our chairship of the African Union had been started under the theme, silencing the guns, creating conducive conditions for Africa's development. We gave emphasis to what was an existing AU goal through adoption of this theme. Of course, all our plans were altered by the COVID-19 pandemic. We are very pleased, however, that some of our objectives were achieved. For example, the AU agreed in December last year that we should strengthen the AU Master Roadmap of practical steps for silencing the guns in Africa for a further period of 10 years. And we agreed as well that there would be periodic reviews every 2 years to understand the content and context of ongoing conflict on the continent and to provide support through the African Union to help countries arrive at conditions of peace and security. We've also been involved in the trilateral negotiations on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. We've had several meetings seeking to allow and support the three countries to arrive at a peaceful resolution on the policy matters relevant to GERD in an amicable manner and with a win-win outcome. Unfortunately, despite many meetings and much cajoling by President Ramaphosa, myself, and other leaders, we have not had the parties reach final agreement as yet, but South Africa has committed that it will remain involved even beyond its chairing of the African Union in order to assist the parties to come to an acceptable to all legal agreement on matters relevant to the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. I conclude by saying on peace and security, we believe too many people on our continent are still confronted by instability, violence, conflict, and underdevelopment. This includes the situations we have in Libya, in the Sahel region countries, in the Cabo Delgado region of Mozambique, in South Sudan, where we see some positive progress, and in Eastern DRC. We are also very concerned by recent developments relating to the situation in Western Sahara. And we are hopeful that the changes in government in the United States of America will provide more positive impetus on the matter of Western Sahara. We believe greater attention to peace in all these regions and countries is critical, as well as support for resolving these problems jointly from the African Union and the United Nations. We had to focus as chair on the COVID-19 response. President Ramaphosa, as chair of the AU, led the development of an African response to the pandemic and ensured consistently African collaboration on this important battle. In addition to ensuring a health sector response, through the Bureau of the African Union Heads of State and Government, President Ramaphosa appointed special envoys to support the continent in mobilizing debt relief measures and securing recovery resources to maintain and provide relief and recovery to economic activities which were hard hit by the lockdown restrictions all our countries had to implement. The COVID unified initiatives led to a greater unified Africa and a greater unified global community. One of the outcomes of our interventions was the creation of the COVID-19 African Vaccine Acquisition Task Team in support of Africa's vaccine strategy for COVID-19. This was in intention to be responsive to the suspicion that the call for vaccines to be a global public good would not be respected by the richest countries of the world. We are working hard, led by President Ramaphosa as current chair of the AU, to ensure that Africa does enjoy access to vaccines. However, we are seeing that the richest countries of the world have not lived up to this commitment of a global public good. And we are horrified to note that some countries purchased 6 times the amount of vaccines required by their populations, thus preventing many poor countries from enjoying access. Our president has continued to work hard on this matter, and along with other leaders within the executive of the African Union, has now secured a provisional 270 million vaccine doses for African countries, with at least 50 million set to be available for the crucial period from April to June 2021. We would hope that those who are part of this discussion will assist Africa in ensuring that indeed the vaccine against COVID-19 is a public good and is available to all, whether rich or poor. I thank you very much for this opportunity.
Dr. Naledi Pandor, thank you very much for your presentation. Many important issues that have been raised, including also highlighting some of the achievements of the South African non-permanent membership of the UN Security Council over the last 2 years, and also the presidency of the African Union. We have plenty of questions coming in from all over the world, which you won't be surprised about. Some of the issues you've already dealt with. So I'm going to do a hybrid of inviting some people whose hands are up to ask their questions, and also look at the written Q&A. The first question that I'm going to turn to is Fabrice Mushiga. So can we invite Fabrice Mushiga to unmute her and allow them to ask their question? Fabrice, please also do tell us who you are and what your affiliation is.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. My name is Fabrice Muchiga, and I'm calling from the University of Bradford, where I'm a student. But I am also from the Eastern Congo. And I wanted to thank Her Excellency for the great leadership and the work she has done. And my question also was, how do we preserve the achievements that you had on the UN and even in Africa? And a special regards to, you know, the DRC and the Eastern Congo, where we had the biggest UN mission. But today we are rising for the mapping report, which has been done by the UN and identify massive violations and killings in the Congo, but still it's blocked at the UN level. And there is massive actually civil society organization and Congolese asking for more enforcement of that. So how do we actually ensure that we preserve such legacy that you had? Because one of the main challenges has been sometimes the process will start and then the overchange on the leadership of the representative of Africa made it a little bit complicated. Thank you so much, and again, all the best for the work you're doing.
Thank you, Fabrice. I'll turn next to Peter Fabricius, who I know is a journalist in South Africa. Peter, Happy New Year. Please ask your question and also do introduce yourself more fully. We're going to unmute you. Peter Fabricius.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, very clearly. Go ahead, Peter.
So I'm with the Daily Maverick. Minister, there are two questions, if I may. The one is as a perennial question, but today the United Nations humanitarian agencies gave a briefing to illustrate the huge humanitarian crisis that's rapidly evolving in northern Mozambique and Cabo Delgado. So I just wondered if you could give us some idea where we're heading towards any kind of regional, SADC or other South African resolution attempt at resolving that problem. And then secondly, you mentioned that you hope that the change in the US administration might alter the America's approach to the Western Sahara. Can you give some idea of other changes that you think and improvements that are possible, including to the issue that you addressed at some length about the possibility of the UN funding AU peacekeeping operations, which I think the US has been largely instrumental in blocking? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. And the next question that I'll turn to is Munjoji Mutandiri. If you would like to ask your question, we're going to unmute you. Munjoji.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Minister Pando, and thank you for your leadership. I'm Munjoji Mutandiri. I'm based in South Africa. I work for Southern Africa Liaison Office, CELO. And I just want to ask two quick questions. The first one is regarding the developing situation in Uganda. I would want to hear your thoughts about what we are seeing and whether you have been able to see that. And as chair of African Union in South Africa, particularly President Ramaphosa, has there been any discussion around how we can try and stop that situation from becoming a more difficult crisis? Secondly, on Zimbabwe, Minister, you have done some sterling work, especially a lot of activities from end of last year and last year South Africa, sending of a mission to Zimbabwe. And we saw a bit of dying down of the activities that we have been seeing. My question is, should we expect some more activity as we approach 2023 elections in Zimbabwe? Because we know that the election situation has always been a crisis point in Zimbabwe. But also to just check if your analysis that you gave at UNISA or the Zimbabwean situation has changed, or it's a situation that you think you're going to pursue in the same way you have been pursuing it. But on the whole, thank you so much for the efforts. We see your effort, we see what you're trying to do, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Munjoji. So I'll hand back to the Minister. Minister, if you'd like to respond to the menu of questions that you received. Thank you very much. Indeed, you had a lot of questions.
Well, thank you very much. I think Peter Fabricius is unfair. He should come and ask me questions in my office. He's just around the corner. With respect to the DRC, this remains an area of great concern, not just for South Africa, but for the Southern African Development Community and the AU as a whole. We have indeed been in discussion with the United Nations about how we might bolster initiatives to protect, in particular, civilians in those areas where there are constant outbreaks of violence, Eastern DRC being one. We are also closely in contact with President Tshisekedi and his government to look at other interventions that may assist in reducing the levels of conflict. So development collaboration between DRC and South Africa. We had begun early on in the DRC with very vibrant development partnerships. But over the years, these have lost traction. And we believe that it is important that we do support the DRC to provide basic social services, to respond in the socioeconomic arena, to the needs of their people, to address the massive infrastructure gaps that there are in the DRC. The DRC will become the chair of the African Union from February when we retire from the seat. We've committed that we will work closely with the DRC to advance the goals of peace and silencing the guns on the African continent. So indeed, we will argue in the context of the UN General Assembly as a member that the missions in the DRC should continue to be supported. And we have been having discussions as SADC with the United Nations, and I think we're broadly agreed, but I leave that to the leadership at the executive level of the two organizations to make the necessary announcements. But we are fully committed to peace and to working as a good partner with the Democratic Republic of Congo. To Peter Fabricius, the situation in Mozambique and our inability as SADC to arrive at an agreement as to what form of support we might provide remains a very worrying puzzle to us as the South African government. We have made every effort to reach out to the government of Mozambique and to sit with them to define a support agenda. Thus far, we've not succeeded in concretizing exactly the nature of support we should give to the government, either through the police service, intelligence, or indeed our defense force. SADC has now mandated that there should be a special summit, which will be held, and its sole focus will be Mozambique and the incursions that we're seeing in that country and the various terrorist acts. We're very concerned about the humanitarian situation. And in fact, we've had an approach from the Red Cross office in Mozambique asking South Africa to provide humanitarian relief support. We are looking at our inadequate resources, and I hope through the African Renaissance Fund that we will be able to provide some help. On the United States administration, I really don't want to say too much. I'd like to hear the definitive perspectives of the president-elect, as well as the Secretary of State-elect. And I hope the Secretary of State, Mr. Blinken, will be confirmed. The statements we're hearing about intended policy are, as I said, very encouraging, but I don't want to get overexcited. I would like to hear and see the definitive policy statements. I do believe recognition of Morocco as having sovereignty over Sahrawi actually goes against the grain of the legal resolutions of the United Nations. And I hope this declaration will be one that will be urgently addressed by the president-elect and his government. I hope that there'll be an improved relationship with the African continent and a focus which is characterized by respect and global cooperation. There are many other areas that I believe are very important for the United States to participate in, but as I say, let's wait for the definitive policy announcements. On Uganda, we've been loath to make quick judgments and are paying close attention to the situation. You would see, for example, that no statement has been issued as yet by South Africa. President Ramaphosa, as chair of the African Union, is in communication with President Museveni, and we hope that that great country will attach to democracy and freedom, and that some of what we are seeing in the media will come to an end. On Zimbabwe, indeed, we intend to continue working with our comrades in ZANU-PF, and also to engaging with stakeholders outside the governing party in order to address those matters that I have previously raised, that a large part of the problem derives from political issues which require resolution so that the development and economic issues can be addressed. If the political and civil aspects are not resolved, we will not see the levels of stability and peace that we require for development in that sister country. And so we remain committed to engaging, but of course you only make advances depending on the degree to which the partners are open to cooperation and collaboration. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. So our next questions will be from two young members of Chatham House's Common Futures Conversations project. For your information, Minister, the Common Futures Conversations project is a Chatham House centenary initiative that uses a bespoke online platform to provide space for young people in Africa and Europe to share perspectives on key global issues and engage with policymakers such as you. Many of these young people are watching today, including some of our 10 members from South Africa. We've asked them to put forward a couple of questions. So the first question by our Common Futures Conversation members is by Patrick Godi of South Sudan. Patrick, we're going to unmute you and please ask the Minister your question. Patrick Godi, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Alex, and good evening, Dr. Naledi and everyone who has joined this discussion. My name is Patrick Godi, a South Sudanese youth leader and also a member of the Common Futures Conversations. Honorable Minister, South Africa's election to the United Nations Security Council 2019 to 2020 and chair of the African Union came on the backdrop of one, the African Union's Silencing the Guns in Africa campaign, and number two, negotiations on the Africa-Europe partnership. Earlier on in your conversation, you mentioned the importance of inclusivity. I want to understand to what extent and in what ways did South Africa bring young people's perspectives in these processes? Thank you very much. Also, before I leave the floor, I would like to extend my gratitude for your country's incredible work in our peace process. Honorable Minister, we need more of your engagement, especially at this critical time where we need to see progress in the implementation of the 2018 peace agreement. For over a year, the full formation of the government has not been complete, but we're still hopeful that with your continued engagement, we'll finally get to see that all the parties involved get to implement this agreement in spirit and letter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patrick. The next person from the Common Futures Conversations, the second question will come from Jie Hui Huat, who is based in the United Kingdom. Jie Hui, please ask your question to the Honourable Minister.
Hi, Minister. Thank you for your time. I am Jia Hui from the United Kingdom. So my question pertains to the African Continent Free Trade Agreement, which started the new year so well. So many goals of the trade were laid out, including empowering women and youths, self-sufficiency of Africa, and sustainable development. My question is, which is one goal which you believe has the greatest potential of being successfully achieved in a short term, and why? Thank you very much.
Minister, maybe you'd like to respond to both of those questions, and then we'll take another round. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much to Patrick. Patrick, I think given COVID-19 and the inability of South Africa and certainly the African Union to convene stakeholder deliberations on the key issues debated within the African Union, we've not had sufficient inclusion of young people in all these processes. We have had, through President Ramaphosa, a very firm focus on addressing gender-based violence, both in South Africa, but broadly on the African continent. And in the deliberations related to that, we've had strong representation of young women articulating the perspectives that young people would want governments to take account of as they respond to this particular challenge of violence against women in Africa and in South Africa, where it's a terrible burden. But I think much more needs to be done to include the voices of young people, as well as the voices of women and other marginalized groups, persons living with disability, for example. So I have argued and continue to do that within the AU, we should do much more to give effect to our civil society structures along the lines of ECOSOC within the UN, so that we do have platforms where different stakeholder groups are able to articulate their views on a range of issues. In the context of the Security Council, we did have young people participating in our deliberations on peace and security in Africa. And I think they gave very powerful indications of how we could solve our conflicts and what needs to be done in order to bring Africa to peace and development. On South Sudan, you have my commitment that our country will continue to work with the people of South Sudan, with the government, to ensure that we arrive at a point where the comprehensive agreement is implemented as fully as it should be. So we have our deputy president is the envoy of President Ramaphosa, and Deputy President Mabuza is in constant contact with the leadership of South Sudan. And we also work with civil society organs in that country. So we remain committed to this peace initiative. Which of the goals could we speedily realize? Well, the first one is, of course, we must get trading off the ground. That means the regulatory framework in each of the 38 countries that have now ratified the free trade agreement should be developed and finalized. I'm absolutely thrilled that January 1 was the date for beginning trade. But I know at the system level, the payment system is not fully developed. I know our customs institutions haven't finalized all the administrative arrangements necessary for the free trade to occur, for the tariff regimes to be at the levels we want. Where I would like to see urgent action is what you referred to. That is really addressing our industrial base and the manufacturing framework so that all countries equally participate in the free trade exchanges. I think at the moment, it is the bigger economies on the continent that would be the primary beneficiaries of free trade. The other economies need support to improve their productive sectors in order for them to enjoy benefit from the free trade area agreement. But this is a massive advance for Africa. And we therefore have a huge duty to ensure that this African continental free trade area agreement is actively implemented. And South Africa is committed to helping to do just that. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you to both questioners. We have one round left, I think, because I'm watching the time. So I'm going to read out a couple of the written questions. I am struck, Honourable Minister, that most of the questions are from men. The ladies are not asking questions, even though it's a female foreign minister. But Elena Esteban Oliego is asking, Dear Minister, thank you very much for your very interesting conversation. With regard to the ideological component of South African foreign policy, I would appreciate your opinion whether it would be more practical in terms of results to be more involved in engagements with all sides to the conflict, like Morocco or Israel, rather than fully and wholeheartedly supporting one of the sides. So clearly she's reflecting the Western Sahara issue and the Palestinian issue. We also have a cluster of questions around what's been happening in Ethiopia with Tigray. And so Mibin Mamen is asking, respected madam, what are the ways in which South Africa will work towards addressing the current conflict happening in Ethiopia between President Abiy Ahmed and the Tigrayan nationals. And I had a final question, which is, I'm just finding it, yeah, is Tony Dykes, who used to be the Director for Action for Southern Africa in the United Kingdom. And Tony asks, the United Nations needs reform, but given South Africa's experience in this, so his question is, which permanent members of the UN Security Council are in favor of reform, which are against? So what's the learning of South Africa having now been a non-permanent member for the third time? There's 3 questions for you, Minister. If we have time, we'll do another short round, but time is now getting short.
All right, let me try to be brief. Well, I agree with Ms. Esteban. South Africa should try and bring the various sides in a conflict together, but there are interests and principles that we uphold. It is the freedom of the people of Palestine which needs to be addressed. It is the self-determination of the people of Sahrawi which is under conflict and not being responded to. So we stand with the people of Palestine and the people of Sahrawi. With respect to Israel, we are very clear that our desired outcome is a 2-state solution. We've never not said that, but it is the people of Palestine who live in conditions where they don't enjoy equal human rights. And so it is their need, their struggle that South Africa will refer to, while also calling on Israel to show a commitment to movement toward addressing the struggle of the people of Palestine. Similarly, with Morocco, the UN has had several resolutions on this matter. They've not been respected, and this is what is of concern to us. So we would call on Ms. Esteban and others to articulate the interests of those who yearn for freedom and to call on those who are in power to be responsive. On Tigray, we are very concerned at the conflict and at the reports that we are receiving of a very serious humanitarian decline and a need for support to the region. We have kept in touch with the government and leadership of Ethiopia, and we continue to ask that there be protection of civilians. The government of Ethiopia has indicated that what they're combating is a threat to the federal state and the system of governance in the country, and that this cannot be left without response. But we've insisted that peace is the way, negotiation is the lesson South Africa learned, and outcomes where all parties are able to say we've arrived at a respectable set of principles and agreements is absolutely plausible. If we could look our enemy in the eye and negotiate, why can't others who are talking to their own countrymen and women do the same? So we'll continue to be engaged. We are hoping that the presidents that President Ramaphosa, the former presidents he had sent as envoys, will return to continue their engagement with Ethiopia and the representatives of the people of Tigray. On UN reform, well, we need to really address the structural instruments that have been in place since the establishment of the United Nations 75 years ago. The world has altered tremendously since then, but we've not altered the mechanisms of the UN to respond to this changing world. And those who are powerful voices enjoy a great deal of power and enjoy that power for themselves. We would like to get to a point of text-based negotiations on UN reform. There are some countries that are permanent members that are not comfortable with this. Often it is because of traditional enmity. But we believe that such concerns must not detract from the interest of Africa in ensuring a more democratic, a more inclusive United Nations system. We are firmly supportive of the United Nations as the premier global institution of our world, but we do believe there's a need for substantive reform, and we'd like to see these processes get underway in practical terms. Thank you very much for the opportunity once more to Chatham House. I know of Chatham House. It's my first time given such an opportunity to speak to an international stage of this kind, and I feel most honored and privileged. Thank you very much.
Dr. Naledi Pandor, I just want to thank you also for finding the last hour to spend the time with us. My apologies to everybody who hasn't had the opportunity to ask their question. There were many questions. We tried to collate them as best we could. And I just want to wish everybody a safe afternoon, evening, or a good morning. And hopefully we can welcome Dr. Naledi Pandor physically to Chatham House to give another presentation once COVID has retreated. So thank you everybody for joining today. And again, also to those of you who are on Facebook Live, I know you couldn't ask questions, but we will have recorded this also for everybody to be able to watch what has just happened over the last hour. Thank you everybody and good afternoon.
Thank you.